You're listening to U.S. Phenomenon with your host, Mario Magana.
Ah, man, I messed up. Just like me did mess it up. Stand by. Dang it. Let's do edit, undo.
Yeah, I went out to one of my oldest friends is Donald Fagen, the guy from Steely Dan.
Oh, yeah.
So we went to see him last night and get back till really late, and I just woke up.
Jeez. All right, here we go. From the Pacific Northwest, in the shadow of the 1962 World's Fair, the Space Needle. Good evening. I am your host, Mario Magana. This is U.S. Phenomenon. If this is your first time checking us out, we thank you for hanging out with us. If you're a returning friend, thanks for being a part and hanging out with us again. You can text us, and it goes directly to me at 775-990-5151. Tonight, our guest is someone who wrote about Milton William Cooper. The book is called Pale Horse Rider. Mark Jacobson is a journalist, author, and friend to this show. Tonight, we are going to talk about Bill Cooper, the man who planted the seeds 20 years before QAnon, and people like Alex Jones who tried to have some type of relationship with Mr. Cooper. We'll check in with Mark Christopher, who takes us to Tacoma Narrows for our Phenomenon Story of the Week. Our guest is someone who wrote many books, including Teenage Hipster, American Gangster, Pale Horse Rider, William Cooper, The Rise of Conspiracy. It is my pleasure to welcome to the show, Mark Jacobson.
Hello, man.
How are you, sir?
Never better. It's a beautiful day here. It's a beautiful day here in Brooklyn, New York.
Well, isn't it always beautiful at night? Isn't it though?
Oh, that's true. It's night. I forgot about that.
Yeah. It's all good. Day, night, night, day.
You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm living on an alternative universe, but I look out the window and it's a day, you know. So what can I tell you?
That's true. How's everything going in your world?
No, outside of being old, everything is pretty good. You know, they get these, like when you get older, you get these things like sciatica and stuff like that you never heard of before, but
it's funny you say that, because I was just talking with a vendor. My day job, obviously, I'm a broadcast chief engineer for this station, one of our stations, KVI, Como, and KPLZ in Seattle. It's interesting because the electrician, because we're doing some work, said, "Oh, dude, I got out of my chair and my sciatic nerve was bothering me." And he's got to be in his 40s. So, I mean, I guess it doesn't discriminate. It's not an age discrimination.
It's a discrimination only in the fact that as you get older, every single thing takes longer to go away. You know?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
That is true. So I know that we've had you on before, and we really haven't we've kind of touched, I would say maybe glanced. And with this being the 20th anniversary of his passing, William Cooper, and the book that most people have read, well, I don't know, it was the number 1 underground book, right? And most stolen book. And
it's the most shoplifted book in the history of Barnes and Nobles. It's also among the most read books in the New York State prison system.
Aren't you glad that your book was not one of those books to be stolen?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Behold the Pale Horse has sold quite a few more copies than the book I wrote about it. So, I don't know about that. But then again, I didn't have Mr. Cooper's particular mindset to be able to come up with a document like Behold the Pale Horse.
It's interesting because when you look at his history, his military service, I know we just had Veterans Day that just passed. So obviously we thank all those who served during those times. But did he have an insight to what was really going on with the government, being that he had a little bit of that intelligence?
Well, I mean, obviously that's somewhat debatable because you're basically getting this thing basically from his point of view, but which I would say, I'm not saying that the man was a fabulist, but I mean, there are certain things that I've noticed that haven't exactly turned out to be true in his account, but that's like everybody's like that. So he had I would say that Bill Cooper's main gift was his ability to kind of see beyond the curve about how a majority of people or a large percentage of people were going to feel about events.
Right.
It wasn't necessarily that he was going to predict events. I mean, that's
it wasn't like he was a
much more mysterious process, but he was very in tune with a certain kind of mindset that later came to it flourished, partially due to him, but mostly due to just circumstances in the culture.
It's interesting because when you go back and you look at his history, I mean, he wasn't like someone like as we've seen in the Bible. He didn't have this like biblical prophecy where he was able to and he wasn't like. It's odd because you're right. He did have a little bit of the curve where he was. I don't want to say that he was prophesizing, but he was definitely getting. Maybe he was falling in line where it was like, I'm just going to throw this stuff out there and see what may stick one day.
Well, yeah, that's one way to put it. I think he actually, I'd give him a little more credit than that. I mean, I would say that, for instance, like one incident, which is really kind of interesting to me, is that during the 9/11 stuff, Bill Cooper is on the radio. He had a radio. He wrote Behold the Pale Horse, and he also had a radio show, which is probably his other main, media thing. So it's called the Hour of the Time. So he was on the Hour of the Time show for about 10 hours straight during the day of September 11th, 2001. And he more or less during that period of time was looking at those buildings, and instead of expressing all the shock and horror and surprise that most people had, to him, this was like an inevitable event. And he more or less laid out the entire, what you might call a conspiracy theory about what happened that day. Controlled demolition, inside job, all those things that people later picked up on. Because if you go back and look at the 9/11 truth movement, or whatever you want to call it, that doesn't really come to the fore until around 2004. This is like already 3 years after, 2 to 3 years after, before it actually becomes a lot of people began to believe in this kind of stuff. But Bill Cooper is already telling you everything that appears in Loose Change, for instance, that movie, which radicalized a lot of people about 9/11. Bill Cooper is telling you in real time while watching TV, what he thinks happened that day. And that's kind of extraordinary to me. I mean, he had the leg up because he believed that the Oklahoma City bombing, which happened in 1995, already 6 years before, was an inside job. He didn't believe that Timothy McVeigh was the person who did it, or if he was involved, he was some kind of walking robot and, had been programmed to do this. So, I think that kind of thought at that point during the 1990s, even though it was a real activist period for so-called patriot types, not too many people were thinking like that. I mean, he had a whole book commissioned by one of his Kaji. What was her name? I can't remember now. But anyhow, he had this whole long book about the 9/11, about the Oklahoma City bombing thing, where he basically decided along with the author, that the thing had been, a setup. In other words, like the bombs were in there, all that kind of stuff. And McVeigh was either the robot assailant or the Lee Harvey Oswald type patsy. Now, you can say whatever you want about that kind of thing, but to me, and my kind of way of looking at these things is, I don't believe in this kind of idea about absolute truth. I think that you create these kind of certain mythic structures like Lee Harvey Oswald.
Right.
I would say that you can walk around everywhere in Seattle and talk to the only people I've ever noticed living in Seattle, which are homeless people and Amazon workers, and ask them all if Lee Harvey Oswald killed John F. Kennedy and acted alone, like I said, in the Warren Commission. I bet you that you'd find very few people that would go with that, And that's basically because, now it's we're going on 60 years since that event. It's 58 years later. So it'll be 58 years later next week or 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So over that 58 years, which is already like 2 generations, the idea that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone and, all the stuff it says in the Warren Report, is just, that's been denied. I mean, that's no longer true. So it's at least in the popular mindset. So Cooper starts from there, really. He doesn't start from, he starts from the position of the government won't even tell you who killed the head of the government. So, once you start from there, and then it's very easy to get to Timothy McVeigh as a robot, and
Right.
9/11 is a setup inside job. So, but most people are not thinking that way. So he appears to be a prophetic voice, which he is to some degree, but it's mostly like he sets out this scenario that you can believe in if you feel like it. And by the time the internet arrives, which is Bill Cooper is probably the last one of these people previous to the internet, because Behold the Pale Horse was written in 1991. Very few people are online at that point, And then by the time of 10 years later, with the 9/11 thing, then you've got a fair amount of people online. And 9/11 thing is the first real internet conspiracy theory, if you want to call it that. While the Kennedy assassination had nothing to do with the internet because the internet didn't exist. And if you want to look back at the original people who were the groundbreaking people on the idea of John Fitzgerald Kennedy was killed not by Lee Harvey Oswald, but by the mafia or, whoever you want to put in that thing, aliens from outer space.
Fill in the blank.
Yeah, whatever thing you want to put in that spot of like, was killed by blank. Those people were mostly on the left. I mean, Paul Krasner and all these people that wrote these books that became popular, disputing the Warren Commission were not conservatives. They were all these kind of radical hippies. And that's where, that's something that people don't remember. Like Bill Cooper comes a lot out of that tradition. I mean, when I went to his house and saw his old books, I mean, he had a copy of what was the name of that book? The Discordian, what is it called? It's a yellow book. It was put up by the Discordian Society, a guy named Kerry Thornley, which is, and he was a left-wing hippie. And Robert Anton Wilson wrote the introduction to that book. And Robert Anton Wilson is also the author, along with another guy named Robert Shea, of the Illuminatus trilogy, which is a fiction book. Robert Anton Wilson, a guy that probably your listeners are either familiar with or should be familiar with. He wrote this book, and it's like a huge book. I mean, it's a total doorstop of a book. It's 1,000 pages long. And it's this fantasy life of this group called the Illuminati, started by Adam Weishaupt. and it's a fiction. But a lot of people read it and they liked it, so they decided it was true. And Anton Wilson was pretty amazed by that, I got to tell you. So, these kind of things happen a lot. Like, for instance, the famous report from Iron Mountain.
Right.
One of these Bill Cooper talks about it in Behold the Pale Horse. So
our guest this evening is Mark Jacobson. You can find him on Instagram at Pale Horse Rider Book. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Please look and follow. And in any event, that report from Iron Mountain actually was written by Victor Navasky and John Kenneth Galbraith, who are these liberal. Victor Navasky was the editor of The Nation magazine, which is, most people would say that was like a neo-commie magazine. It was like, it still comes out and it's very left. So he wrote this thing as a parody of a lot of different, what he thought were right-wing documents. So I'm just giving you a little history here. I hope it's not too boring.
Oh.
But there's a guy named Willis Carto, who was he was the head of the Liberty Lobby, which was a extreme, kind of a John Birch Society, extreme right-wing kind of thing. So he picked this up and put it in his newspaper, which is called The Spotlight. And Navasky and Kenneth Galbraith, who was a famous economist that, Reagan was Ronald Reagan, and, was mostly John Kenneth Galbraith. Economic kind of stuff is a straight Democratic kind of stuff. I don't know if it works or not. I don't have an opinion about it. But so once they saw that the sort of extremists on the right, which Cardo really was, because he was half a Nazi, they said, well, that's not true. We wrote this, and nobody believed them. Nobody believed them as they actually have written this thing. So things happen in the culture, and I think it pertains to Bill Cooper, where, people are not really that interested in whether or not this stuff is exactly, by the letter, like it can be fact-checked or not. We know this already. This is something that's been talked about for the past 10 years ad infinitum. And I think it's just the fact.
It really hasn't really changed since then till now. And right now, like we were just talking before the show started, and we were just talking about how I feel like we just been on this pause, and it's like Groundhog's Day over and over, but it's really, it's.
Well, I think it like, the Donald Trump is a kind of significant figure in American history, I think. Maybe even more so than we might even realize, even though he's obviously a major figure. And as long as he's in the picture, his shadow will be stuck where we are. I'm not taking a position on this one way or the other. Readers, don't get too upset about that. Right. But he's got a position, and
it's like the Democrats can't shake him, it's like a bad girlfriend. I'm not saying that
it's like a bad girlfriend. Well, I don't know. The thing about Trump is like, it's very difficult. Nobody plugged into this kind of irrational part of the mind. And I don't find that. See, one of the things that the liberals are completely mistaken about, and they can never get this through their head, is that just because you think you're a rational thinking individual, that doesn't make your opinion better than somebody who believes that Jesus Christ rose on the third day. It just doesn't do that, There's a lot of different ways to find truth and different ways to live your life. And, this is one thing that I think that the human race is going to have to. That's the reason why it seems like it's on pause, because I think this is going to take a really long time to work out. So it isn't like, you look at the internet or you look at the newspaper and things are completely different than they were yesterday.
Let's not get this twisted. It's like, okay, the vessels and watch how things are disseminated, obviously, with social media. And let's be honest. I don't think that whoever the Republican Party is going to put in power or, make for the next idol in regards to who will be the person they will have run, regardless on when we go back in time and look at this, social media elected Donald Trump. Let's just get that out there. And I mean,
yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean,
and even with, the whistleblower and everything that's come out, even us getting spanked by, hey, what we put out there about maybe, social media should be governed. And I know that you and I had differences in regards to that. And it seems like right now it was like, oh, I laugh because everyone's like, hey, social media is down for 6 hours. I wonder what the hell.
You saw the people are panicking, right? So,
we got to change our names. Nothing to see here. Move along. And you know what? Like, let's be honest. Regardless, social media, it's a great tool, but
I love it, man. I didn't grow up with it. See, it's a whole mystery to me, because I'm 73 years old. So I grew up without this stuff. I reached my, however demented intellectual, compass without it, but I also like to believe that time marches on and people are just different because of the influences that they have. And there's never been such a, well, I don't want to use the word invasive, but that's actually true, kind of like consciousness forming device like social media. So, and whether you like it or not, it's just a fact of life,
Right.
So, I mean, you can complain all you want about the effects of social media, but you're not going to stop it. So, and I think Mark Zuckerberg, is making a big mistake by backing up the way he is like this.
Oh, it's interesting, that's for sure. When we come back after we check in with Mark Christopher, who's going to take us to Tacoma Narrows. Do you remember the bridge when they called it Galloping Gertie?
Oh yeah, man! I got a video of that. I look at it every so often.
Yes,
they have a bridge in New York called the Whitestone Bridge, which is exactly that design.
Wow!
And then after that fell down, they did something to it to make sure that didn't happen. But,
when we come back, Mark Christopher we'll check in with Mark Christopher for our paranormal story of the week, who takes us to the Tacoma Narrows. So we'll hear about that as our phenom story of the week. If you have a story idea that you would like to share with us, you can send it to me via text or email or call us up, 775-990-5151, or you can email me, Mario at onairmario.com. Our guest tonight, Mark Jacobson. You can find him at on Instagram at Pale Horse Rider Book. You're tuned in and listening to the U.S. Phenomenon. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for the paranormal story of the week. Our guest this evening, Mark Jacobson, who wrote the book Pale Horse Rider. You can find him on Instagram at Pale Horse Rider Book. Follow him. He's got great stories, great Instagram. It's like going back in time with the Bill Cooper story. So thank you for spending some time with us this evening to chat about the man who's been gone for 20 years. Let's get back into what Bill really was about. I mean, he was a pioneer since there was that whole situation with regards to stand by. It's not the final countdown, that's for sure. It is not the final countdown. Hold on.
3, 4, 2.
Right. It's but Bill Cooper was kind of a pioneer for his time back in the 90s doing this radio show and putting this book together about, I don't want to say he prophesized, but he was able to get, I don't know, almost like he just threw it out there and it was like some of it's actually in the book.
Well, I mean, the thing is that Cooper, I mean, most people, the history of Bill Cooper, which is like detailed in the book I wrote, I mean, I follow his entire existence as much as I could find out, actually. But, he started off in this world as a flying saucer guy. That's where he first appears. He appears in the flying saucer underground world of the second half of the 1980s. And that people maybe don't remember it or just don't know it, but until 1987 or something like that, there was no such thing as Area 51 or any of these. I mean, that Area 51 existed, But the idea of Area 51 as a kind of mysterious place where the government did X, Y, and Z, and the flying saucers were in there, and Bob Lazar, and all these kind of famous, pseudo-famous UFO people. This is all starts in the late 1980s. And Cooper was somebody who, I won't even mince words. I mean, he was of the paranoid, persuasion. So you could think of aliens from outer space as being the good guys who are going to come and help us out and show the human race their errors of their ways, or they were coming to get us. So, and Bill was definitely of the coming to get us kind of persuasion. So then in one of the, I don't think anybody's ever done this, he just decided that, well, this is all a bunch of crap. This is just a distraction. There's no such thing as flying saucers. And yes, people are being controlled, and people are being programmed, and all these things that people talk about all the time. He decided the flying saucer thing was just one more distraction about keep people's minds off what was really going on, which was basically sort of this economic, we're going to get all
world order. Like
the New World Order, which is like, however you want to define the New World Order. I mean, everybody's got their own version of the they person. Everybody's got their own version of that. And what Cooper did was he was a pioneer in the consolidation of the word they. He laid it out: secret societies, money guys, Council on Foreign Relations, these kind of things that were very, you don't hear that much about the Council on Foreign Relations, but if you were of the persuasion and when you were doing this kind of show in 1992, you'd be mentioning the Council on Foreign Relations quite a bit, I think, because they were at that time considered to be, the string pullers. You're always looking for the string pullers. Who's behind the curtain? Who's the wizard behind the curtain? That's what Cooper was interested in finding out. And he's light years. I mean, the reason why I was interested in him is like, he's so much smarter and more intuitive than almost every single other person who makes a living out of trying to scare the hell out of you. I mean, he's much more, he's just much more a complete human being than somebody like David Icke or something like that, has these kind of nutty theories that, the reptilian idea and all this kind of stuff like that, which to me is just sort of like that, it's fine, but it doesn't really speak to human values.
I had some audio real quick that I was able to find. Let's just hear a little sample of William Cooper.
Attention to what is it that's driving us insane? Yes, something is wrong in America.
The sound you hear is dripping blood. This is the start of Black Sunday.
Today's newspapers, folks, are full of stories about the rampant rise in divorce rates, the increasing abuse of children by some parents, increases in the incidence of rape, pornography being read by an increasing.
Do you feel that?
I mean, that's a good clip, man. That's pretty much. That gives you a real sense of what's going on there. But the thing is, it's not really fair because Cooper had a great sense of humor also. So, that was one of the things that really set him apart, Plus, he played all these good records. I mean, he wasn't like a Bible thumping kind of prig. He was like a kind of, he sort of was a bohemian. I hate to tell his fans that he was a former hippie, but
Right.
That's really the truth.
It's interesting because, going through some of that audio and just finding some of it but the hours that he spent doing that radio show, I mean, we're talking lengthy hours doing that show. I mean, I can barely do one and scrape one together, let alone do multiple back to back to back. I mean, we're talking he poops all over, Art Bell and Alex Jones and, and keep going on. It's interesting because when you read some of his things, including what you've posted and have said, even in the Rolling Stones, that he says, look, you got to read. If you don't, not doing your homework, he was the pioneer, ladies and gentlemen, to what we all know as fake news. He was calling it fake news before it was called fake news. I mean, he was like, you need to discern what you're hearing. If you just hear what you hear, then you're no better than the flock of sheep.
Well, I mean, the thing, I guess his most famous phrase outside of "wake up, sheeple," which is really his phrase.
Right.
I mean, several of the things that Cooper used to use in his radio show is kind of stuff that, any radio guy would use. I mean, different phrases and stuff like that actually crossed over into the major mainstream culture. And nobody knows that the word sheeple comes from Bill Cooper. He may not have been the first person to use it, but he certainly popularized the phrase.
Right.
And there were several things like that, but the most important one really is do your own research.
Yeah.
Do your own research, which is now it's an interesting phrase. I mean, because do your own research is what exactly does that mean? And I would propose that for many people, I've said it many times, I think there's good conspiracy and bad conspiracy, like anything else,
Right.
Good ice cream, bad ice cream, I mean, anything. It's like some stuff is better than others. So Cooper's thing about do your own research, because when he's saying that meant go to the library, stalk these old bookstores, find stuff that makes sense to you, which is different than what it might mean for the past 15 years or so, which means go on the internet, find the stuff that you already believe in, and say, okay, that's it. I did my own research, and therefore I feel that I'm a truth seeker. So, and it's a little, I kind of laugh about it, but I think that's really the case. I mean, do your own research means take it upon yourself to find something out you didn't know before. Take it upon yourself to take the risk that something that you might read or find might disagree with what you already believe before you start looking, and actually consider the possibility of changing your mind. So I don't think that I think that's what Cooper meant. I don't know if he always followed his own dictum, but that's why a lot of the stuff that I find in this so-called in this topic of so-called conspiracy is really kind of like a little depressing and boring, to be boring to put the better word on it, because how can everybody who said that they're a truth seeker find exactly the same thing?
Well, for sure, because I mean, even like with UFOs, Bigfoots, JFK, the world being flat, inside job, 9/11 being an inside job. I mean, you can go on and everyone will have a different answer. Obviously, I think that's what makes conspiracies so unique, interesting. But again, there are the ones that are as mundane, white, boring as, well, Lee Harvey Oswald killed Kennedy.
Well, I mean, all right, so take the we never went to the moon one.
Oh, that's a great one. I love that one.
I mean, for instance, that one, to me, I find that to be very depressing kind of conspiracy theory. Because number one, it's, you have to jump through so many loops and hoops to try to make that seem to make sense. And also, it's very, it puts down the human spirit of adventure. I mean, isn't it a lot more fun to believe that they actually went to the moon than that they faked going to the moon? I mean, it's just sort of like, to me, as a member of the human species, I feel that I would prefer to believe that, whatever you want to think about science and all this kind of stuff like that, that they were able to put it together and do this thing that people had dreamed of doing for ever since the species came online as the dominant force on this planet. So, and to say that, well, all I did was take these few clips from a Stanley Kubrick movie and blah, 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 that just seems like so reductionist and dim-minded that I feel like I don't want to be part of that. I mean, I believe it is actual. I mean, Yeah, I mean, the government lies to you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's probably true. I mean, I know
Well,
it's
sure,
true.
for sure.
So, but I mean, the fact that they're not lying about every single thing. I mean, or that just would mean that they are totally in charge of everything that ever happens. I mean, that the government and even the corporations, who I think people are really talking about when they start talking about the government, except they won't admit that because it's against the capitalist system or something. So, like, they, the idea that you can fix stuff, just think about how many times that people try to fix stuff and it doesn't come out right. I don't think I don't put that within the category of things that can happen like clockwork. So a lot of things happen really by accident. And the real conspiracy stuff is the people that take advantage of these accidents, like, say, the Bush administration and the 9/11 thing. They just moved in and they did what they wanted to do. They had that Patriot Act ready to go, and that's the kind of thing that, I mean, after studying this stuff all these years, that's what I came
it really it does fuel the conspiracy because, I mean, all of a sudden, you have this 9/11 event that happens. All of a sudden, now the Patriot Act comes into play. What does someone who lives out in Podunk, whatever, in some small town, what happens? The further you get away from the metropolitan city, your views change. Smaller world, everything seems to go back in time a little bit. People start to freak out. Next thing you know, there's these outrageous conspiracy, like this is an inside job. We're going to some FEMA camp and we got to check into the post office. It is so funny how social media right now has so much, especially TikTok, and I'll call them out. You look at TikTok. I don't even have it, but someone's like, dude, did you see that video? They're talking about stuff that's happening out here in Washington, in Yelm. They're making these FEMA camps. They're like clearing these woods, and people think that they're going to get placed if they don't get the jab.
Well, the jab, I mean, actually, Mario, let me get my power thing for a second.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. You can
I'm about to run out here.
You're going to run out. Our guest tonight, this gives me a chance to take a reset. Our guest tonight is Mark Jacobson, who is the author of Pale Horse Rider. You can find this book on Amazon, on his website. Go to Instagram, follow him, like him, at Pale Horse Rider Book.
Okay, I'm back.
He's back. Thank you for being a part of the show after all these years now. It's year 2 of a 4-year plan. No, we'll be here for a while.
A 4-year plan. It was like, why make it a 5-year plan like the Communist Party?
Right.
No, I mean, but I just want to clarify one thing. Just because I'm saying some of the stuff I'm saying today doesn't mean that I don't believe that thinking in a conspiratorial manner is a bad thing. I think that there's got to be, yes, in a world where everybody's pushing a particular narrative, to use the word that really is pertinent here,
right?
If you're going to just sit there and bend over, so to speak, for the CNN version or the Fox News version, you're really being intellectually delinquent.
No. I mean, let's be honest. There's the truth. There's your story, my story, and then there's somewhere in the middle the truth. Now, in regards to, I know that you've done a lot of studying about Bill Cooper, the man behind Behold the Pale Horse. If we were to hypothesize right now, let's just bring him back in the Wayback Machine. Let's say we cryogenically generated him and we did the Disney thing. We unfroze him, brought him back, from, whatever. Let's just say we go back in the DeLorean, go back, we change history. We fast forward, we bring him back to 2021. What do you think he would say about the COVID-19 shot? Do you think our friend, he probably would hate me too. So I don't know that Bill.
He's a hater. He was definitely a hater, but I often do. I'm all during the Trump administration. When I would go around and flog my book and that kind of stuff like that. One of the most prevalent questions was, well, what do you think Bill Cooper would think of Donald Trump? So, my answer usually would be, well, Bill Cooper is a constitutional kind of guy. I mean, he's for following he's what they call an originalist,
Right.
And I think that he would not. I would hope. I mean, as somebody who is a real kind of I'm a supporter of Bill Cooper. I'm in favor of people expressing their opinion. I'm
Right.
100%. I'm an absolutist about the First Amendment. Absolutely. You can say whatever you want as long as you don't mess with me. I'm okay with you.
Right.
So, so I'm a supporter of Cooper's, and I always will be. And I got to say that most of the people from my particular group, I mean, I live in Brooklyn. I mean, come on. Donald Trump got 16% of the vote here. So so you got this kind of thing. But I mean, they said, why are you writing a book about this fascist guy? I said, well, he's not a fascist guy. You're completely misinformed. So because they can't think straight. They can only think one way. I mean, which is really depressing. So you got that kind of thing. But I think Cooper would rebel. I would hope that Cooper would rebel against some of the kind of orthodoxies that have been accepted in his name, for instance.
I mean, everything from like a QAnon who really may have taken a page out of the book. Alex Jones,
no doubt about it.
Right? It's just,
and there's no doubt about that QAnon went to school on, just like Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Alex Jones used to listen to Bill Cooper every night.
Like a baby or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, I used to, when I was a kid, I would grow up and cousin Brucey would be on the radio, and my parents said you can't listen to that kind of crap. And so I would be there with the transistor radio under the covers, and and that's Alex Jones with Bill Cooper. I mean, really. So, so he influenced a lot of the major voices on that side of it were basically influenced by Cooper in a way that is much more so than people care to admit or even know about. Because I mean, one of the things that QAnon did was he wrote in one of his early drops. He wrote a long thing about Bill Cooper's book and all that stuff about Bill Cooper, and then Bill Cooper's book went from around 2000, where it always is on the Amazon chart. It went to number 17. It was ahead of all these Goodnight Moon, stuff like that people buy all the time. It just shot up to the top. So this guy Rob Houghton, who was one of the guys that was running Bill Cooper's website, he called me on the phone. Said, do you know anything about why Bill's book is number 17? And I never heard of QAnon at that time. This is at the very beginning. So I did some research. I did my own research. I found out that, there's this guy named Q who was mentioning Cooper's book, and that's who's buying the book. So it was interesting. So yeah, he's very influential. And I would say, you can't really say, because Bill Cooper was also, he was in business to make money.
Of course, he was a public speaker, did a lot of public speaking.
Yeah, I mean, he was always trying to get sponsors for his show and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's hard to say what he would go with, because if he felt you know more about this than I do. I mean, if you felt that your audience was correct, orientated towards one way or another, you would attempt to give them what they want, more or less,
For sure. No, that is for sure. I mean, we took, after we were attacked by the Russians under a complete. So I do the radio show, and as I take the new position as chief engineer for the radio stations, we were attacked by Russians and had a malware or a ransomware attack, destroying and decimating. I had to come in and do the radio show live. I probably should have had you come on. And I just did it. I just said, okay, we're going to do
the Russians attacked you personally. They attacked your station?
Stations, yeah. And
really?
The whole Sinclair Broadcasting and Lotus radio stations at the just decimated the products. And so I did the radio show live, and I took some calls, said, okay, we're gonna do it like Art used to do back in the day. My show is after Somewhere in Time. I was like, I'll be great. So I'm like, for 20 minutes, 23 minutes and 50 seconds, because that's the first segment. I'm just on there rambling, talking by myself. And I was like, okay, we're just gonna do it. We're going to just talk. I'm going to tell stories, why the show exists, blah, blah, blah. And then we start getting calls. And, you know, there's a couple calls that just we took, and they weren't too particularly happy as they were like, we love the show. We just don't like the astrology reports, or, we don't like psychics because it's like, and they had their opinions about it. Said, do you think, we were like, and that they said that Art was soft on that. I said, do you think Art really believed it, or do you think he was really looking at it as entertainment? Because it is very entertaining when you listen to these people. Let's be honest.
Well, everybody's. Look, astrology's been around a long time, man.
Yeah, they were using it back in the old school days. The church was using it. We've had Karis on to talk about it. Called Stars versus Church, and then when the church said it was bad for business, it was like, well, you can't be astrologers anymore. You have to be astronomers. So, because they were using the stars to align with things in biblical times. So. That being said,
that's astrology is the beginning of astronomy. So I don't know. Right. People have all kinds of reasons about what's holy and what's unholy. And you can ask. I don't know. It's just. That's what makes the world go around. People's opinions about things. So I believe that Bill Cooper, at the end of the day, is a positive force. Despite the fact that he has really had some of his later followers who didn't really get exactly what he was all about, have cheapened his message in a way, I think. But if you really look at this stuff, it's kind of like, some of it's nutty. There's no doubt about it. If you read, I would guess that nobody's really ever read "Behold a Pale Horse" from one cover to another, because it's hard to read.
It's definitely hard to read. I remember doing it back when I got my hands on the book. It was like right when 9/11 happened. I was like, what in the actual is going on? So as you can think, as a young 20-something-year-old kid, 23, I was like, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. This guy wrote a book. We're all going to FEMA camps. I'm checking into the post office. It's in the first couple chapters of the book. We're going to use the Washington. We're going to use the interstate highways. They're going to start putting us in these camps, and we're going to start. And this was all in the book.
It's been in a million different dystopic movies ever since.
For sure,
so it's reinforced. But that's true. But if you read Behold the Pale Horse, the very first chapter is the one that matters. The Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. That's the one.
Right.
That is the most. That is the one. If you want to dip into this stuff, and you don't really want to dip in that far, just read that chapter, and you will find. And this is material from, who knows when the thing was written. Sometime during the 1980s, probably early 1980s. So they found it in a IBM copier, whatever the mythos of how it came about. Sort of like the golden plates of Joseph Smith. So that stuff is really very prescient, I think. I think that really is a legitimate predictor of the way people are going to feel in an over-technologicalized society. That is the predictive kind of like prescient, you want to call it prophetic. I don't know if it reaches the level of prophetic, but it is prescient. The idea of excessive technology in a society where, you created this alternative brain in a computer system. And now it's a war between the human brain and the computer brain of a sort. It's like,
right.
You could say that, that those scenes in 2001 where the computer is trying to kill the people, that's also prescient. Those kind of things, you look at that, and then you look at They Live, and it's all in the popular culture, this kind of stuff. That Bill Cooper was the first person to really be hip to the fact that They Live was an interesting movie. It was just a schlock movie made by John Carpenter, 1987, I do believe, with Roddy Rowdy Piper as the star. It must have been made for like, $600,000 because that's what kind of movies that John Carpenter was making at the time. He's the guy that made the original Halloween and a bunch of other films. And he was like a great underground kind of like grade B filmmaker. But, those kind of films and those, they begin to create these kind of mythic things that when somebody like Bill Cooper, who's very articulate about this kind of stuff and kind of gets what they're all about, and because he's not a college guy, he went to community college for 6 months or something. So like, he understands it intuitively because he was in the front lines in Vietnam. He goes out there. He feels that he's fighting for American freedom. He gets there, finds out that, well, that ain't true, and what am I doing here? I'm killing these people that I have nothing against, and they're trying to kill me, and they actually, we are in their home, So, I think that anybody who wants to abide by the stand your ground thing has a hard time defending the Vietnam War, So, it's so Cooper is somebody who knows that people he trusted and loved who were fighting in the front lines of a war were there, to some degree on false pretenses. So, people can argue about it all you want, but I think that's the way he felt about it. And after that, that really set him on his course.
And I think he died way too young. And as we get close to wrapping things up here from the Pacific Northwest, do you have any last comments? I know I don't even want to call it celebrating it. We're looking back 20 years of a man whose life was cut very short.
Well, he died when he was 58, but
not by natural causes.
Well, if you look at his autopsy, I know that every time I write that Cooper might have had a drink or something like that, I get all these letters from these people saying he never drank. Like, how do they know? His autopsy shows a really, his liver was twice the size that it's supposed to be. So like, it's right there in black and white. I hate to break it to you, but the thing is that I think he was a legitimate person. I really do. I feel that obviously I do because I've written several books and I decided to write a whole book about this guy. I might have been wrong, might have been right, but to my mind, he's a significant figure and it's been proven to be true because so many, 73 million people voted for Donald Trump. So they didn't all vote for Donald Trump because of some reason that Bill Cooper would vote for Donald Trump, because I think that the last thing Bill Cooper would ever do is vote for Donald Trump or any other candidate, So the thing is that, so that goes from, it's just astounding. It's like you got this whole, how many people are in the Congress now, the Republican side of the thing? And 163 people believe that Trump still won the election. So I don't know. I haven't looked at all the stuff. I can't tell you, but it does seem that he lost by 8 million votes. That seems to be the case, So, but in any event, I don't think Cooper would ever maintain that idea.
Yeah.
He was caught in a world before when the so-called dominant reality of rationalism and the Enlightenment was still functioning. I don't believe it's functioning at the moment. So people can really pick and choose about what they want to believe in. And when you're in that situation, it would be a lot better if everybody sat down and agreed on a new standard of belief, because things are not going well the way they are,
Regardless on what side of the aisle you may be on, it seems that no one can actually come to what we used to call to the middle. It's our way. If you're not going to be able to play in the sandbox, all right, well, you're out. So I have to, going back and looking through some of my notes and reading some of Bill Cooper's stuff and him being a pioneer really of what a lot of people now look as mainstream conspiracies. It's almost like, even in the hip hop community, I want to keep this brief, but it's almost like a Bible of conspiracies.
Oh, yeah. No, well, the thing is, that's, for me, the fact that all the hip hop guys believed in it. That was the most interesting thing.
Yeah.
Because, why does a big fat guy on a mountaintop in Arizona, become pseudo Bible for a guy like Prodigy, who's in Mobb Deep, and he and his partner come out of the Queensbridge projects. I'm not actually Prodigy was a more middle class guy, but it just that kind of cultural crossover. I mean, that's the kind of thing that people should look at. It's interesting. That's interesting. How do they come up with these ideas that that come out of totally out of left field? And I was walking around in Harlem on 125th Street, and there were all these booksellers there. And Behold the Pale Horse has always been, the kind of guys that sell books on the street, on a table.
Mhm.
Behold the Pale Horse has always been a bestseller up there. And you walk around, and people go, "Oh yeah, I read that when I was a kid. Yeah, it was really interesting." Blah blah blah. I mean, much more than in a society, like if you go to Coeur d'Alene in Idaho, where these right wingers are supposed to live. So, it just that kind of stuff is kind of amazing, and worth looking at. So,
I think
why does the Wu-Tang Clan name check Bill Cooper all the time? What's the reason for that?
Oh, I mean, could it be because of the society of the of like the big man, or if it's like the Illuminati or the engine that could be the society of Wheel, that someone of maybe a lower class, middle class, trying to make their way up, looking at this book for some inside knowledge of what they may be thinking on the other side.
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, it's like sort of like if you want to say Bill Cooper had a really dark vision of the future. I mean, if you're sitting there in Rikers Island or something like that, and that could speak to you,
Yeah, for sure. As we wrap things up from the Pacific Northwest, it's late on the East Coast there. So I thank you, Mark Jacobson, for taking the time. You can find him on Instagram at Pale Horse Rider Book on the gram. We'll have links to the podcast up shortly. Again, thank you so much for your time. This is probably like the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th.
I love you, Mario. You're great. I mean, you're gonna exceed. Art Bell is going to be locked in some kind of unknown chamber.
We're bringing back Art Bell. I mean,
bringing back Art Bell. How does the Coast to Coast feel about that?
Well, I mean, we had a guy who was on the show a couple of weeks ago who was on Coast, who was doing audio reversals and called the radio show, wanted to be a part, and had a piece of audio from Art's show from way back. So it was quite interesting, and he was able to do some audio.
I gotta tell you that Bill Cooper hated Art Bell.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
He heavily hated Art Bell. I mean, I think he was against anybody else who was on the radio. But I mean, Art Bell was in special hatred for him.
Oh, like on levels that are like almost scary. Like,
yeah, you can't. It's like hard. Nobody ever hated anybody as much as Bill Cooper hated Art Bell.
And it can, I don't know. I mean, I look at it and I'm like, I wonder if it was for any reason other than, oh, well, this guy may, what is this guy really bringing to the table? And, if you look at Bill Cooper's story, I mean, the guy, going to war and being in Vietnam, he's got some stories to tell. We can find your book. You can find your book at on Amazon. You can get it on the Kindle Fire audiobook. You can get hardback, paperback. Can't get it on CD anymore, but I'm sure you can find
it. I don't think you can get the paperback because there's no paperback that exists. So,
well,
which is I'm sending out a plea to your listeners that anybody who wants to publish this book in paperback is certainly entitled to get it because I own the rights again. Because Random House declined to put it out due to supply chain issues of paper shortage, which I don't really believe. I gotta say,
right? Well.
In any event, one thing, Mario, that not to take up more time, I don't think we really got to this part of how Bill Cooper really died.
Well, go ahead. I mean, bonus. We'll put this in the bonus.
Put it in a bonus. I mean, look, this is the consensus position about what happened to Bill Cooper that night.
Right.
I'll try to make it as short as I possibly can. So Bill Cooper, whose wife had, the story is that Bill Cooper sent his wife and his family away for their safety. But according to all the reporting that I could do, and including reading the FBI report, which I realize is tainted in the minds of many, Bill Cooper's wife left him and took his children with him. And he did anything he could to make them stay, but she left anyhow for reasons that we won't need to go into, except to mention that Bill Cooper was married many times before, and other wives had left him as well. So anyway, so he's living up there on that mountain by himself. It's not really a mountain. I've been up there many times. It's maybe a 250-foot high hill. Right. So, Cooper was under the impression, or whether he either believed it or not, it's hard to tell, but he didn't like people coming up near his house, even though he only owned one of the several lots. He owned maybe there were 12 or 14 lots of property lots up there, and he owned just where his house was, I do believe. And other people used to go up there because it's the highest point in the area, so you can go up there and see the sunset or something like that. So Cooper used to chase him off. He would come out and chase him off, and sometimes he would chase him off, vehemently, and because he had this big gigantic dog, Crusher, and he didn't want people up there. So this guy who was in town, a guy named Scott Hamlin, who is the town doctor pretty much, and it goes into some deep stuff about the Mormons and the Mormon population in this town and the non-Mormon population in the town. The town is, predominantly Mormon, maybe as much as 90%. So I don't know if Cooper knew who this person was or not, but the Hamlins are a big deal. They founded the town, and the idea that, this guy was up there because when he was a kid, before he went out to medical school and all kinds of stuff like that, he used to ride his bicycle up there. So he took his kids up there. Now, this is his story, so, people can debate it all you want. So he was doing this one time, and Bill Cooper came out and said, "Get off my property." And this guy says, "Not not your property. I'm just up here, eating an ice cream cone with my kids." And Cooper said, "Get out of here now," and followed the guy back to his house, which was, not that far away. And according to Mr. Hamlin, drew a gun on him and said, "Don't ever come back up here again." So Hamlin is, there are two different streets, I think, in Eagar, Arizona, named after the Hamlin family. They are a big deal there, So he wasn't going to let this pass, and he wrote a lot of letters, and the local police were loath to do anything about it because Cooper, they just thought of Cooper as, well, he's our local celebrity. He lives up on the hill over there, and it's better not to mess with him, So, but this guy's not going to take that. So he writes a letter to the Apache County Sheriff's Office and says that got to do something about this. Can't just be running around, waving guns in people's faces. So there was a sheriff there named Art Lee, who had been in forever, and he didn't want to do anything about it because it wasn't worth it to go up there and mess with Bill Cooper. So because Cooper is on record, and you can hear it on the radio 50 times, if you come up here, I'm going to shoot you dead, right? So nobody wanted to mess with this. So, however, a new sheriff got in town, a guy named Brian Hounshell, who was a kind of cowboy kind of guy. He eventually was thrown out of office for all kinds of malfeasances, but he's like somebody who wants to make a splash. He says, "Oh, you don't want us to come up here? We'll show him." So, they were several different situations in which they were trying to get Cooper to come down and, press charges against him for this thing that he allegedly did. And Cooper, of course, wouldn't cooperate with that. So he So they plan this insane, I mean, really, literally mad midnight attack on Cooper's house. They're going to get him in the house. They're going to play music loud, and he's going to come running out of his house because they didn't want to take him on inside his house because there were all these things about how fortified he was. And the last thing they really wanted was like another Ruby Ridge or something like that. So,
right.
And so they did this. They had this loud music, and Cooper did indeed come out of his house to tell him to shut up. So, which is certainly within his right, I think. So, but he didn't. The thing that went wrong was Cooper, instead of walking out of the house as they thought he might in their demented plan. This is the dumbest plan you ever heard of, almost guaranteed to get people killed. So he takes his pickup truck and goes down there, sees immediately that it's a setup, and drives back to his house as fast as he can. And and it's like just like a cowboy movie. One of the sheriffs, gets on the running board and holds on to it, and like Cooper knocks him off, and the whole thing. It's just fantastic stuff for a movie. And then he's trying to get inside his house, and there are two cops up there who were trying to stop him. They were in front of the other cops, I guess. And Cooper, he had a famous .45, which was the gun of choice, and he was talking about it on the air. And he didn't have that. He had his .38 snub nose, and he sees this cop coming at him, and he just fired at the guy and hit him in the head. So the other cop, and I got to say, this is not very clear in the police report what happened in what order. So, it's very possible that they were shooting before Cooper shot. Of course, in their version, Cooper shoots first. So, what?
Has to be.
Well, of course. That's just the way the police reports are always constructed. So he was trying to kill me with their car.
Leave no evidence, leave no witnesses.
Yeah, no. So I mean, we're not really on the police side here at all. So we're just trying to figure out what happened.
I wanted to be an officer, but but go ahead.
So in any event, this other officer, a guy named his last name is Goldsmith. Can't remember his first name, maybe Joe. And so he lets go. I mean, here's a gun. He just starts doing what policemen do, and he shot Cooper. He discharged 9 bullets of his Glock 45, I think, in the clip. I don't know if that's how many bullets are in a clip of a Glock 45, but that's what it says in the police report. So, and Cooper's he's dead. And in fact, the thing that's amazing about it, and talking about Bill Cooper as a prophet, is that, and you can listen to the radio broadcast and hear it. He says, they're going to come up here at midnight and they're going to shoot me dead on my front porch. So they came up there, and the time of death is 12:05 a.m. So at midnight, so the whole thing is going on at midnight. And when Cooper was dead, his head hit the front porch of his house. So he was right about that. That he prophesied his own death down to the nearest detail. So you got to give it to him. I mean, that's pretty impressive, I think. But in a crazy way. Right. So, but I mean, I just thought that your listeners might not want to hear that.
Well, I think that it. I mean, it's his truth. It's his life. It's what he talked about in multiple episodes in his in his shortwave radio show. I think it's in the book as well, right?
It's in my book, yeah. I mean, that's pretty much. I mean, what I just told you was basically.
All right, now you don't need to read the
book,
Right.
Because I'm a journalist, I'm not a polemicist. I just try to find out what I can find out, and that's what I do.
Well, and they always say journalists never retire. So if you find anything good,
I wish I could, but that hasn't happened yet.
Well, if you find anything, let me know. Again, it's an honor to have you back on the show, and always fun to hang out and chat about, I think, one of the best conspiracy books out there. Even being at
appreciate that.
It's just, if you haven't read it, it really this book is what people should be reading. Your book, to have an understanding. Then go back and read the other one. I mean, it's out there. I mean, so go pick it up. You can find it on Amazon. Pale Horse Rider. It's William Cooper, The Rise of Conspiracy and the Fall of Trust in America. I love
It's
that.
not my title, I believe.
I know.
Pale Horse Rider is my title. The rest of it is the publisher, you know.
Right.
But, so,
well,
anyhow, thanks so much for having me on, Mario. It's always fun.
It's always fun to hang out. I remember
Mike, though. I like to talk to Mike.
Yeah, we got to do another show. We'll have to figure out a topic of du jour to have Mike and you do a good roundtable on. And we should really do it live. We really should do it on the big.
I think the pandemic thing is really it's still. I mean, that's a dividing line. I mean, that's going to be.
We
got to go away anytime soon. You know, the vaccine, the whole thing, all of the stuff, because this is really life and death issues. You know, and it's not just.
It's not a conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy. It's a point of view. I mean, there's conspiracies that people will listen to that make you want to get the shot or not get the shot. But I mean, it's more like a personality kind of thing, you know?
Right. Well, we'll have to get everyone back on. We'll have to bring back the gang. It's been a while. It's been a while since since the prediction show last year. I mean, that's coming up too. I mean, the prediction show and
all right, predictions. I got a lot of predictions.
So we'll do that, and maybe we should do that one live and let the KBI listeners get involved and see if they have any predictions that they'd like to see come to fruition.
That sounds like fun.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time again. You can find him on Instagram. I almost called you Michael Parker, but Mark Jacobson on Instagram.
Please, I like Mike, but really,
right. Much cooler. Come on, the OGs of hippies. Our good friend Mark Jacobson on Instagram at Pale Horse Rider Book. Again, thanks for your time this evening. We appreciate it. Go buy the book. It's been an honor. Thank you for hanging out with us again this evening.
Okay, man. Anytime.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.